All right, you younger generations have a really messed up belief at what Gen X is and what shapes us and who we are and how we think the way we think. Gen X, along with the generation before us, grew up against the big international background of the Cold War, the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Yeah, they talk about it today, but then it was a firm belief it was without a doubt going to happen. And then there was Watergate with Nixon for the older Gen X that experienced how you couldn't trust government right off the bat right away. Corporate greed, AIDS, Live Aid, the dot-com boom and bust of the 90s, nuclear disasters, the space shuttle Challenger blowing up, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the global financial crisis, not once but twice because there was the junk bond fiasco in the late 80s, the dot-com boom in the 90s that fell, and then you had the 2008 housing collapse. So there you go, and now it all rocked worldwide. And then you had the wars, Bosnia, Afghanistan, Iraq. I mean, some of the Gen Xers, a lot of them, they know firsthand what those were like because they were there, they were in them, while others protested against them. We watched the rise in everyday use of the word alternative to describe almost everything. It was applied to everything, from people to music to clothes. You know, the anti-drug campaign, Just Say No, microwaves, the explosion of fast food chains popping up everywhere and everyone going to the drive-thrus because they were cheap. Nobody went because they were good. It was cheap. It was easy, accessible food. And we were the generation of kids that could go there on your own and get it quickly and it was cheap. Or your parents could hit through the drive-thru because we were also the generation of the highest divorce rate. 50%. It was a 50-50 shot. You only had one parent. And even then, a lot of our parents probably weren't too happy and weren't around because it required both of them to work in order to make a living. Because believe it or not, inflation then and interest rates then were a lot higher than they are now. We're still not quite there. Things aren't as bad as it was when we were kids. And yet everybody is griping now that we don't care and we don't understand. We were the innovative startups. You know, all you young kids that love your social media and all that stuff, you know, you're welcome. Thank Gen X. You wouldn't have any of that if it wasn't for us. They're the ones that created it. It started out with things like Friendstar and MySpace. And then, you know, you ended up with the Facebook, which then you got everyone, oh, Facebook, that's for old people. Well, guess what? Facebook owns Instagram, all you little model people that think you're out there and a few people like, and you dance around and do something stupid. And all of a sudden you figure you're a famous model. And because you got a few Instagram followers, don't work that way. I mean, and on top of that, we lived during the floating dollar, financial deregulation, globalization, and we contributed to the relative economic prosperity and high living standards that were created still coming in the time. What are you doing besides just complaining instead of trying to actually gain something and create something? You just want to whine and bitch. I mean, yeah, we had the high living standards, but the property boom in the 90s, right, and early 2000s, when Gen X started buying homes, those that could, I mean, it pushed the home buyers so deep into debt and financial exposure that Gen X is more pronounced to lose everything more than any previous generation if the markets turn. Those of you say, well, you can't buy a place, you can't rent a place right now. Well, you know what? You'll be able to, because eventually if things collapse, it's Gen X that's going to take the hit and you'll end up benefiting for it. So don't be angry. Work with what you got. I mean, we're the generation that experienced being laid off from jobs, getting disappeared in your job because it was restructured or got outsourced to another country, you know, reorganized, relocated, all this other stuff than any other generation, which forced us to acquire many, many skills and become very adaptable in the workplace. Something that the younger millennials and the Gen Z just don't seem to want to do. You don't want to adapt. You want everybody to alter everything to fit you, but you don't want to adapt to the world the way it is. Well, guess what? You got to learn. You got to gather multiple skills and you have to learn to adapt or you will just get left behind. The Gen X that didn't learn to adapt, they got left behind because believe me, we didn't baby our own kind if they didn't live the way you needed to in order to get by. We didn't baby them. We didn't coddle them. They got cut from the pack and wound up food for the others. You understand? So for those younger people out there, if you take what I said and you listen and you actually listen to what I said and you understand what I'm saying, it will make it much easier for you. You will find you can get along with Gen X and you'll be able to function with Gen X in the workplace, even though we are much older. Because you know what? We don't care if somebody age on whether they can do a job or we'll hire them. We'll do it based on skill. I mean, I said once before that when I was running restaurants and hotels, I had this one particular location where I had people everywhere in my restaurant from like 45 and 50 years old down to, 14-year-olds that would come and do a few hours on the weekend. And whenever I was sitting there and things got hard and things got busy and everyone was running, losing control and they couldn't find it, there was this one girl I would put in charge to run the kitchen and everything, and she was 17. 17. It didn't matter to me how old people were. She was the best at keeping it organized, keeping everybody straight, and keeping everybody focused. So if you take what I said here and use it to understand Gen X as we're out here, and as we're sitting there and you're complaining that we're not moving aside already for you, well, guess what? We just moved in there and we're going to be around for a while because most of us are just in there, and you're looking at another 20 years, 20 to 25 years before we are fully retired and moving out of the workplace and out of the positions we're in. You better get used to it because you all are going to be pushing 40 by the time you start finding places to move into. And then you're going to find a real problem and be asking us to stick around because the generations that are coming after you are going to be even smaller because you guys all have this weird philosophy about everything now where there's just not going to be near as many kids born. Gen X will no longer be the smallest generation there is. The others that are coming after Gen Z will be smaller. Anyway, this is Drac saying bye-bye for now. And until next time, I'll catch you all later. Peace.